Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Fink, and I'm the Marketing Specialist for Viva Select California. Thank you for attending our Learn in 30 webinar today, focused on the PI system. After the webinar this morning, we'll be doing a short Q&A. Please type any questions or comments into the Q&A box, the chat box, or you can email us at webinar@california.avivaselect.com. Now I'd like to introduce your presenter for today's webinar, Pierre Harry. Pierre is a product specialist and has been with Viva Select California for 2 years. Good morning, Pierre.
Morning, Annie. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Pierre Harry, and like Annie said, I'm a product specialist with Viva Select California. And in today's 30-minute webinar, we're going to be discussing the PI platform. We'll be monitoring the chat for questions, but I'm also going to field a Q&A at the end of this webinar, so feel free to hold on to your questions until then. So let's start by talking about what the PI system is, and as well as its value and what it actually does. So let's start with this, right? Managing operational data, as you can see in this diagram here, is a complicated process. Your plant floor can contain dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of important pieces of machinery that are crucial to your operations. We're lucky that we live in a time where technological advances in industrial automation allow us to easily communicate to these devices and gather insightful data from them. But the problem is there's a plethora of data sources with very specific communication protocols and data types and differing data flows, as I'm sure you guys know. And this can lead to complex data streams that make it really hard to track. So as you can see in the image here, the process of getting the data from the different data sources on the left to the appropriate consumers on the right is typically fairly complicated and difficult to track. And this becomes increasingly difficult as you scale up your operations. So that's where PI comes in. PI seeks to provide order to the chaos that is operational data. So what exactly is PI? PI, first and foremost, is an enterprise data management platform. It's not a SCADA platform, but it's a software ecosystem that acts as a powerful and robust historian that pairs up with your SCADA. So the diagram that you see here illustrates the role that the PI system plays. It all starts with a collection of operational data from the data sources on the left, which include, SCADA, PLCs, you have SQL databases, and manual entry is supported as well. Then the second step is the storing and enhancing of this data using the historian capabilities of PI, which we will look at later in this presentation. And finally, PI delivers this organized data to the right data consumers and decision makers. So let's talk about the architecture of the PI ecosystem. Generally speaking, there's 3 broad constituents to a holistic PI system. You have your PI Edge, your PI Core, and your PI Cloud. These 3 units work together to provide all the necessary components that you need to collect your field data, historize it, store it using the historian aspects of PI, and deliver it. The first component is PI Edge, or the PI Edge data store, which you can see on the left side here. The PI Edge data store allows you to tap into data from remote assets beyond the process control network. So these are data sources that are generally difficult or expensive to connect to, but they aren't necessarily on your plant floor, they're remote. So the PI Edge data store simplifies the process using PI Edge adapters and lets you aggregate that data to then send it to the PI Core. And that's the second major component, the PI Core. This is where your on-premise PI components are situated, which includes our bread and butter PI server. The PI server is a robust and secure system that's designed to collect huge volumes of operational data and store it. Like I mentioned before, this data can include aggregate data that you sourced from your PI Edge data store, as well as data from your plant floor on premise. And last but not least, we have the PI Cloud on the top right up here. The PI Cloud was formerly known as OSI Soft Cloud Services, but has been renamed to Aviva Data Hub. This is essentially, a cloud to edge data management platform, the goal being that you can use the cloud to share your data more easily without needing to use on-premise solutions. This opens the gates for API and other cloud service integrations. So you can use the PI Core and PI Cloud and leverage them in tandem to consume all this data using data visualization products like PI Vision and PI DataLink, which I'll be demoing later in this presentation. Not all of these major components are required for a successful Pi system. So you don't actually need Pi Edge Data Store, for example, if you don't have any remote assets to connect to. But really the point of this slide is to show you guys how the Pi ecosystem works in unison to collect and provide the data that we'll be using in this demo. So when you're building out your Pi ecosystem, there's generally 3 layers to the workflow, and data collection is where it all starts. One of the main strengths of the Pi system is that it can connect to any source of operational data out there. It actually includes a long list of, I believe, over 400 interfaces, connectors, and adapters. So all of this allows you to natively read from over, I think it's 225 industrial automation systems and protocols. So these interfaces and connectors are off-the-shelf tools, so they're ready to use out of the box and don't require any development. This makes the Pi system data collection reliable and secure. So I mentioned before the different types of data sources that are supported by these tools, and you can see some examples on the left side here. And really, long story short, the Pi system is set up to work with all these data sources to accommodate our large customer base. We want our customers to be able to get all the data that they need inside of the Pi system to draw inferences from, without any limitations based on certain vendors. One of these, hold on, I have a video here. I'm going to pause it for just a second. One of these potential data sources is the Aviva Historian. With the 2023 system platform release, you can now replicate data from an Aviva Historian to Pi. This replication feature can help enable infrastructures where the Aviva Historian sits on a SCADA network in a tier 1 configuration and gathers data from your SCADA system, and then shares the data securely to the Pi server that's on the enterprise network in a tier 2 configuration. What this does is it strengthens your data security while allowing you to segregate both systems. So at that point, you can have a member of your organization use Pi Vision on the enterprise level and keep them out of your SCADA network entirely. So you have that segregation between the tier 1 and the tier 2 levels. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video to show how the replication process works. And this might actually look similar to some of you because this is the same process as what you would do to replicate from a tier 1 historian to a tier 2 Aviva Historian, or from a historian to Aviva Insight. So just like those other 2 replication processes, the replication server for Pi is configured in the System Platform Management Console, which you can see right here. Once you've chosen the appropriate data, which is what this video is showing right now, you can replicate it, and then you can actually even rename the tags if you wanted to. So the tag names that you can see here on the destination on the left, you can rename them under the source tag names on the right column. And as we'll see in a few seconds here, we'll be able to see and extract that data from the Aviva Historian inside of Pi Vision right there. So the data that you see right there in Pi Vision is the data that was replicated from the historian. So the second layer of the workflow is the historian aspect, the storing and contextualizing of the data. So this is achieved through the Pi server, which is the heart of the Pi system. Gathering data is great, but you need to apply order to the chaos if you want to be able to draw any use from it, right? Otherwise, your insights don't really make any sense. So the Pi server is responsible for taking in all the data that is coming from the data collection tools that we talked about and storing it for a long time at the highest fidelity possible. The Pi server proprietary database is designed to be optimized for time series data, and we have many enhancement capabilities that add value to the raw data, like analytics, event bookmarking, and notifications, and I'll talk about those later. So the Pi server is essentially a powerful historian. As we will see in the next slide, you have a few tools at your disposal to strategically label and organize your data. Some of you have plants where you're monitoring thousands and thousands of tags and data points every second of every day of every year. So organizing is an essential step, because if we don't have faith in knowing exactly what the data we're looking at is, if it's not labeled correctly and organized correctly, how can we possibly be confident in the value of the insights that we draw from it? So let's talk a little bit more about these data storage and enrichment tools. I think it's important to know what they are, because These are the backend services that can be used to manage the historized data in the Pi server, making it really easy for us to find that data using PyVision and PyDataLink. So the first tool I wanted to talk about is the data archive. The data archive is the real-time data storage layer used in Pi system deployments. Data is stored in Pi points, which are Pi tags essentially, with a timestamp and value. So it's time series data storage. It's a historian. Data archive can store data with both historical and future timestamps as well. And it can read up to 2 million events per second and write up to, I believe, 200,000 events per second. So this is what makes it a very high performance historian and the most powerful historian on the market. On top of data archive, we have the asset framework feature, which lets you create data structures that can provide context to your raw and sometimes chaotic data streams. So you can use asset framework to set up asset hierarchies with specific logical relationships. And you can see them kind of on the bottom right side of this diagram here. So for example, you can attach multiple pump assets to a specific pump station and set those up as parent and child relationships. And you can see that on the diagram here where the pump 01 and pump 02 assets are children to the pump station parent asset. And then after you set up those parent-child relationships with the assets, you can define specific data streams and relate them to those assets as attributes, which you can also see on the diagram here. These are the flow rate and pressure attributes of these pumps. And since many assets share similar attributes, you can save these data structures as templates and reapply to new data streams to save time and effort in setups. So if I set up my first pump, pump 01, save it as a template, I can copy that over for the next pump and the next pump, so on and so forth. And I can even include relational data when it's useful, like manufacturer information and next service date as well. So in a lot of ways, it's similar to the Aviva system platform workflow, where you can create templates and just copy them over as many times as needed to save time and make it more efficient, as well as reduce human error. So in short, the asset framework puts your data into context and organizes your data to create a digital twin of your physical operation. The next tool we have is the asset analytics layer, which lets you build out calculations. Pi provides an extremely powerful library of built-in functions that you can use for these calculations in the Pi server. These analytics run in real time, and so you can save the results as an additional Pi tag and use them moving forward. They can even be backfilled for the entire history of the source data, so you can apply analytics for historized data that is backfilled, right? So moving up the stack, we next have event frames as well, which allow you to bookmark important events and add descriptive context for further analysis. So what you can do with that is you can capture downtime events, you can capture alarms, low efficiency events, startups, you can capture batches as well. And so we can actually use these event frames strategically inside of PyVision, and we'll see that later in this demo. And last but not least, we have notifications as well, which lets you send specific users an email or alert to notify them of important events that require action or follow-up. So you can notify your operators if there's troubleshooting that's required. So once an event frame has been captured, you can add a notification easily, and all the relevant information, as well as the links to the appropriate data displays, can be included in that email as well. So it's a really easy system to notify your operators or your engineers and include all the relevant information really easily and intuitively. And all of these functions are available to every user of Pi server at no extra cost. So once you have a Pi server license, you get access to all these features here. And last but not least is the final layer of the workflow, which is about delivering the data to the users. This is where the Pi data visualization client tools like PyVision and PyDataLink come in. You can use these tools to create dashboards, reports, and even dynamic real-time displays that update rapidly every second in real time. In total, I think you can visualize up to, I believe it's 1 million signals per second in real time. So really even though there's technically there's a limit, it's really unlimited. 1 million tags is a lot, and you can visualize all your data in real time. One of the great things about these tools is that you can use them really anywhere. You can use PyVision, for example, on any web browser or even a mobile device if you wanted to, as long as the web server authentication is set up correctly. So in a lot of ways, it's very similar to one of our other products, Aviva Insight, which some of you might be familiar with, because both solutions don't require any IT maintenance investment since they're hosted on a web server. And with that, that's it for the presentation. And I'm going to segue into the demo portion of this webinar. So since we were just talking about the data delivery layer of the workflow, I'm going to start by demoing PyVision. So just give me a second while I pull it up. Can you guys see my PyVision screen here? Annie, can you see the web browser?
Yes, I can. Sorry.
Awesome, no problem. So this is PyVision. It's the web browser-based visualization client. So this is the home page here. And as you can see, this is where you can organize your displays that are created. This is a generic demo that has a lot of existing displays created. So you can see there's 483 displays created in this particular solution. On the left side, you have your navigation area where you can search for them by using keywords. You can also favorite certain displays. The ones that I favorited by clicking on the star, they'll show up in the favorites area. If I were to create displays, they would show up under my displays. And you can also sort by recent displays, displays that were recently worked on. And on top of all that, you can create folders underneath that to organize your displays if you have a lot of them to keep track of them. And so in this particular demo environment, we sorted and organized these displays by specific industry type. So I'm going to show you guys the process of creating a new display, but first let's actually take a look at some of these displays. This one, for example, is a food manufacturing display, and you can see the type of KPIs that you can show using PyVision right here. If I were to create on a new display, if I wanted to create a new display, I would click on the new display button on the top right, and I'll show you guys the process for building it out because it's very intuitive. The first thing you want to do is select the type of visualization tool that you want to use inside of your display. So this can include line charts. This can include data values. You have your tables, you have bar graphs, so on and so forth. Really, any type of way that you want to showcase the data, there's an option for it up here. And once I've selected the one that I want, for example, I'm going to click on the line chart type right there. I'm going to select the specific asset and attribute. So the specific data point that I want to show, and I'm going to drag it over. So for example, let's go to Water World and go down this parent-child hierarchy that I talked about inside the asset framework. And inside of Water World, I can see the attributes that are associated with that asset. And I'm going to go ahead and drag over, for example, monthly water consumption. And because I selected the line chart and then selected that data, that Py tag, what it's going to do is it's going to plot that tag over time in a line chart right there, which you can see. And that's how you build out the displays. You just search for your assets and your attributes in this navigation tree, select the type of visualization tool you want, and then just drag it over. One thing you could do is also use the graphic library. So there's a pretty extensive list of graphics that you can use here to build out your screens as well. And it's also easy to use. Just drag and drop them over. I'm going to drop a couple over to show some examples. One thing that PyVision does is it lets you build out calculations, and that's what I'm going to show you guys right here. You can do calculations on the fly. So what I'm going to do is build out a calculation And click on the plus button right here. And for example, what we're going to do is we're going to calculate monthly water consumption. And the way this works is I have my calculation editor open right here. I'm going to go ahead and search for two different tags, and I'm going to do a calculation. So what I'm going to do, so you can see here that we have a monthly water consumption tag. We also have monthly water consumption per capita and population. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply monthly water consumption per capita by population, and that should give me monthly water consumption. So what I'm doing is I'm writing out the calculation right here by putting a star to multiply monthly water consumption per capita by multiplied by population. Click on save, and that saves the calculation right here. And then at that point, I can drag and drop it over as a line chart because that's what I have highlighted, and that will plot the calculation. And as you can see, because we also have a tag that stores monthly water consumption, I didn't actually need to calculate it because we have a tag that already has that data. But just for the sake of showing the calculation, I also calculated it to show you guys that it's the same result right here. The units are a little, or the decimal points are a little off right here, but you can see that it's the same result, right? So I was able to infer that that tag by using a calculation. Another thing you could do inside of PyVision is use what's called event frames, which you can see right here. And what event frames are is they display the metrics, the data that is associated with specific events as those events are defined inside of the Pi server. So what I mean by that is, I mentioned it before, inside the Pi server, you can define certain events with a start and end time. So that could be a batch, that could be downtime, that could be an alarm, whatever it is, that you define it with a start and end time. And then once you've defined that start and end time and associated specific tags to that, that event, you can use the event frames inside of PyVision to quickly build out a metric screen that shows the data that's associated with that particular event. So I'm going to show you guys what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for a specific event. So I'm going to do is I'm going to search the database. Let's use Waterworld again. Let's keep it broad for now for any time, any asset. I'm going to click on apply. And what that'll do is that'll bring up the list of events that were defined inside of Pi server that were associated with this specific asset. So you can see, for example, this event right here that happened looks like 20 minutes ago, RPM drop, has a few attributes associated with it because these are the metrics that changed that are associated with a specific event. So if I want to quickly take a look, under the hood, what happened when the RPM dropped? Well, the daily water consumption changed. So let's go ahead and drag that over and see how it changed. The influent pump value, the event duration, right? So these are all the associated metrics that are associated with that particular event. And I can very quickly build out a KPI dashboard that helps you for troubleshooting purposes, right? So you can very quickly take a look at these metrics. One thing you could do as well is create an event table. And what that does is it just lists out the different events as they occurred. So it's basically just an event. It's an event table, right? So you can see the list of active events as they happen throughout the day with a start and end time. And it was easy as dragging and dropping it over. And you can see on the right side, I can configure the columns to specify what I want to see in that table. All of this is controllable. All of this is editable. So it's about 11:24 here. And so with that, I'm going to open up the floor for Q&A, the last 5 minutes or so of this webinar. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat and or speak up. I don't know if you guys have, if you guys are allowed to speak up out loud this webinar. I don't know if you have the right privileges, but if not, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. So we're going to go ahead and spend the last 5 minutes here with the Q&A. So thanks everyone for listening, and Let's have at it.
Wonderful, thanks, Pierre. So our first question is, what is Pi Process Book and how does it relate to Pi Vision?
Yeah, thank you, Annie. That's a great question because Pi Process Book was actually the old version of Pi Vision. So it was a lot more limited, but it's essentially the predecessor to Pi Vision. So Pi Process Book is not being sold anymore. It's been discontinued. It's being sunsetted, and Pi Vision is the new version of that. So if you hear the term Pi Process Book, it's obsolete, and the current version is Pi Vision, which you saw right here in this demo.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have a request for more Pi Vision demo in the Q&A, and then we also have another question as well about how licensing works. Does it work based on trend points or client installation?
Yep, so that's a great question, Robert. It's based on trend points, and we actually offer Pi under our Flex program now. And what you can do is you can buy a Pi server license based on the amount of tags that you need. So whether that's 5K, 10K, so on and so forth, it's based on that. So based on the size of your application. Mike is asking you to see some more examples. Sure. So we can see some examples of some Pi Vision displays right here. Let's go ahead and open up some more examples. This is a transmission example. So you can see here are some KPIs as they relate to transformer metrics, right? You're monitoring the voltage of the transformer over time using these line charts right here, as well as temperature settings on the right side. Oh, and that's one thing I wanted to mention is the great thing about Pi is it can use SCADA data, but it's more than just that, right? It's a data management system that's more than just SCADA. So you can actually bring in data from other sources as well, such as weather report sources, which you can see this is what this particular KPI is using. I've also seen financial data as well. So you can use all these different data sources and build out context for your data without only using SCADA data. So we have some more questions in the chat. Will Pi Manual Logger still be used for manual data entry? That's correct. And I know that there is a long-term plan to integrate that with mobile operator rounds as well. Is Pi will replace Historian as well? So it's an alternative to the Historian, right? I won't say it's going to replace it because the Viva Historian is still valid for a lot of customers. It just depends on what you want to use it for, right? Like I said, the Aviva Historian is well suited for sitting on the SCADA network, while Pi is more suited to sit on the enterprise network, right? As an enterprise data management system that is being fed by the Historian. But that doesn't mean that for some customers, the Aviva Historian doesn't make sense, right? The Aviva Historian can still be used in a tier 2 configuration as well. It just depends on your situation and what you want to use them for. So the answer is it's not replacing the Historian, but it's an alternative to the Historian. We have another question. Why not use Pi as a tier 1 Historian rather than Aviva Historian? So I kind of already answered that, but Pi can sit on the SCADA network. It's a little rare, but it's just that it's a little overkill, right? Pi is more expensive than the Aviva Historian, and like I said, it's better that it's more appropriate for a tier 2 enterprise network, because at the end of the day, the Aviva Historian and the client tools for the Aviva Historian are more tailored toward technical folks like operators and engineers that work on the SCADA network, while Pi, as you can see here, is tailored more for non-technical folk that are on the enterprise network, right? So these are your decision makers that aren't necessarily operators or engineers, right? So you can use Pi on your SCADA network, but it's typically overkill. Aviva Historian licensing is the same. Can we transfer? No, so the licensing is handled differently. Pi is a separate product from the Aviva Historian, so it's handled differently and it can't transfer over. Can we have Aviva connecting to multiple Pi servers in case the site has multiple Pi servers? Yes, so you can have multiple Pi servers as well as what's called ancillary Pi servers. So those are essentially redundant Pi servers So yes, you can have multiple Pi servers connecting to Aviva, other Aviva products like the Aviva Historian. Do you think Pi would replace Aviva Insight? That's a good question. In a lot of ways, they're similar, but I don't foresee it replacing it. I just foresee them being offered kind of both being offered in the future, right? The other thing is Insight is a subscription tool, right? It's a SaaS product, while Pi is more than that, right? With Pi, yeah, you have Pi Vision, which is similar to Aviva Insight, but it's an on-premise solution as well, right? While Insight is only on the cloud. So Pi includes cloud components, but it's more than that. It's a more holistic system, while Insight is only a cloud-based product. So I wouldn't say it's going to replace it. They're both going to keep being offered as different solutions depending on your needs, right? And that's at the end of the day, that's how I would say, Pi isn't meant to replace anything. It's just another offering that we have in our portfolio that can address, your needs depending on what they are, right? But again, that doesn't mean that the Aviva Historian becomes redundant or Aviva Insight becomes redundant, right? All of those are tools that can be useful depending on what your situation is. And for those of you that are sticking around still, I can show some other screens as well. If you guys want to see them, like Mike mentioned, this is a transmission screen. Let's go ahead and take a look at some other ones. Let's look at some oil and gas, for example. Oh, looks like this one's empty. Let's look at a pharma screen. Oops. Let's find one that is built out here. Oh, we have another question in the chat. Can I push data from Aviva Insight to Pi? So, oh, and a nuclear screen. Let me see if I have a nuclear screen. So Insight, so the answer is there's no native way to do that, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. So you can always do that via OPC, because OPC is generic enough that Insight and Pi both speak it, right? So Insight can share data to Pi via OPC, but there isn't a native connector at this time. You can also do that through CSV files, right? So there's, I would say, kind of indirect ways of doing it, but no native ways of doing that directly currently. And so I'm looking for a nuclear screen. Let's see, bioreactor. This one's not opening up, I'm not sure why. Looks like there's no nuclear example specifically, unfortunately. But if anyone, so I'm going to scroll through this these options here. If anyone wants me to pick one specifically, let me know in the chat and I'll open it. You can take a look at some of these examples here. I did not see a nuclear example specifically, unfortunately. Here's a compressor. And let's see if we can pull up some other examples here.
And then Pierre, we just got another question in the chat. They're asking, how does Pi Vision licensing work?
Yeah, so so it depends if you, so Pi is offered mainly under our Flex program, and with the Flex licenses, you can get what's called a client license, and that gives you access to your Pi Vision as well as Pi DataLink, because those are the two different client tools for Pi.
Wonderful, thank you. And then how is it bundled?
So are you referring, how is the Pi clients, how are they bundled, or Pi server itself, Robert? Pi Vision. So I'd have to check, but I think you can get client packs of 5 or 10 and at a discount, and then you can add individual users on top, I believe. I would need to double check though. But I believe it's packs of 5 or 10. So Gia's asking, we are currently having an existing Pi server fully licensed. Can we just get Aviva connecting to our existing Pi server without any extra license for Pi? Well, if you're referring to the Aviva historian, the answer is yes. So if you have a historian, if you purchase the historian license and replicate it, you can replicate it to your existing Pi server. Yes. Is it only available through a web app? Pi Vision, yes, it's available through the web browser, and that is allows it, you can use it on a web browser that's on a computer or a mobile device, or a tablet as well. But yes, it's through a web browser. But the Pi DataLink is an Excel add-in as well, which is not a web browser. And I can actually show you guys Pi DataLink here. So I pull up Pi Data. Oh, here's another question. So you don't need a Pi connector if connecting via Aviva Historian. You do, but the Pi licenses come with those connectors. I'm showing a screen here. So right here, I am showing Pi DataLink, and Pi DataLink, just like if you're familiar with the historian client tools, it's an Excel add-in, right? And so it basically gives you access to these different wizards that you can see on the top here. So you can calculate current value, do some compressed data calculations, and so on and so forth. And once you click on one of them, it'll open up the wizard on the right side, which lets you select a specific item in your database, and you can configure the different parameters to run your calculation. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and do a current value example. I'm looking inside of my database here, and I'm going to select longitude, for example, for this site. Fills out the data item cell with the item that I want to perform my calculation on. In this case, I'm not doing any calculation. I'm just going to display the current value. And then I'm going to select the output cell right here and click on OK. And then it displays the longitude value right there. So it just makes it really easy to extract data from your Pi server using Excel. So it's an alternative to Pi Vision. Pi DataLink that you see right here and Pi Vision are both the client tools that you can use. So the question from Wayne, looks good. We can use Historian Insight. I'm new to Pi, so it looks really good and definitely want to look into it further. I like the pre-built items in Pi Vision. It seems to offer more options than Insight. Yeah, I would say they're different, right? It's hard to compare Insight with Pi Vision. because both are valid solutions. It just depends on, your budget and your application and what you need, right? But yes, I agree. PyVision is very sleek and very easy to use. You just drag and drop everything, like I said, and you can do on-the-fly calculations, use event frames, use, a library of symbols as well. It makes it really easy to build out your KPIs. So it's essentially an HMI software in your web browser that's read-only. There's no control, right? That's one thing I wanted to specify. I'm not sure if I made that clear, but with PyVision, there's no control. It's read-only from the web browser. So yeah, Wayne, if you want to find out more information on Pi, I'm not sure who your account manager is, but feel free to reach out to the account manager and we can dive into this further. And I see, Robert, your question is still in the chat here, but yeah, so you do need a Pi connector because you need the Pi API connector to connect the historian to your Pi server, but this comes with your Pi server at default. It's part of the standard list of connectors. Awesome. Does anyone else have any more questions about Pi? Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Oh, we have one more question. Yeah, no problem, Robert. Thanks for joining. And oh, before we drop off, just wanted to mention, if anyone wants to get a even more in-depth demo, feel free to reach out. We can always, set up something and give you more, personalized demonstrations of the Pi server, including PyVision, DataLink as well. So, please reach out to us and let us know if we can help you with that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pierre, and thank you to everyone who attended. If anyone would like to review any portion of this webinar, a recording will be available on YouTube and our website, california.avivaselect.com, once available, and you'll be receiving a copy of it via email. Thank you again for attending and have a great day. Also, for those that are still on, we do have 2 upcoming Pi workshops. I'll post those in the chat if you're interested in attending.
Awesome. Thank you, Annie, and thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day.